This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on second volume of Economic Survey for 2016-17. The participants are Santosh Tiwari, Economic Analyst, and Mukesh Ranjan, Journalist.
The second part of the economic survey, which was basically to be given just before the budget, but since the budget was advanced by a month, so the first part was given in February. The second part was presented in Lok Sabha by Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. So this part also talks about a kind of a midterm review of the performance of economy in the country. Santosh, main point of this economic survey, this has projected in a sense that the growth which was given in the first part was around 6.75 to 7.5 of the GDP. Now in the second part it has moderated. It may not reach or achieve the upper limit of the range given in the first part. So how do you see?
See, as far as the numerical number is concerned, the number has been maintained from what it was in the first part of the survey, which was presented before the budget in February. So that is, the range has been kept at 6.75% to 7.5%. So to that extent, the Chief Economic Advisor is saying that the range remains the same, but in the last 6 months or so, the economy and the policies have moved in a direction where, as compared to the earlier stance of this 7.5% looking more achievable, the chances are that this year the GDP growth will end up being closer to the lower range, which is 6.75%. And he has given reasons for that. And two main reasons why the GDP growth looks to be closer to 6.75% and not 7.5% are reasons like farm loan waivers, and also the lack of, interest rate cut in the economy, and also this twin balance sheet problem, which is NPA problem. Then you have pressures from expenditures like pay commission recommendation, etc. Lack of growth in real economy. All these pressures, the Chief Economic Advisor is saying, that would lead to the growth remaining at the lower level of the projection, that is 6.75%. But the plus point is that he is saying that though introduction of GST, goods and services tax, and also what happened during demonetization, their impact would bring in some positives, but these positives would be basically apparent from next financial year onwards. So you have to look at his projection in a balanced manner. He is saying, and which was there in the first part also, what he is saying is that this year the growth projection is critical. So it may be below 7%, but if the government maintains policy stance, if the government comes out with reforms, etc., then the next year and year after would be better. That is what economic survey is coming out with.
The second point is, this economic survey is directly hitting at RBI on the rate cut, which you mentioned now. Given the fiscal deficit projection and the target, the survey says that the fiscal deficit would be around 3.5, and next year the target, according to FRBM provisions, inflation has to go to 3%, which the survey says is achievable. The tax revenue is quite buoyant. We have good amount, even balance of payment also, we have good amount of foreign exchange reserve. So given this lower side of fiscal deficit, good balance of account situation in the country, that 0.25 to 0.75 basis point, the survey says that it is higher on the interest side from the RBI. Do you agree with the suggestion given in the survey?
The government's objective always is to push growth. But RBI has a different objective altogether. It is not that the RBI doesn't support growth, but the RBI's priority, RBI's role is to maintain inflation at the committed level, which is ±2, 4 ±2. The good part is that your inflation is expected to be considerably below 4% level in next year or so. And that is the point from where Chief Economic Advisor or the economic survey has built its case for reduction in interest rate. Now, whether it should be cut between 25 basis point to 75 basis point, or it should remain at the current level, 25 basis point cut has already happened, is a decision which the Monetary Policy Committee of RBI has to take. But to the extent that yes, there is a requirement in the economy to cut interest rates so that your real interest rate becomes at the realistic level. Real interest rate is the rate which is basically minus your inflation. So minus your inflation, the rate has to be reasonable and which should be supportive of economic growth. Chief Economic Advisor is saying that that still the RBI has this scope of cutting interest rate by 25 to 75 basis points. He is right from his own point of view, but RBI has to look at it from the inflation projection point of view. If the RBI thinks that the inflation would come under pressure or might come under pressure, which is 4% level going ahead, then obviously it will maintain the rate stance here. There is another thing also. There is no guarantee the way economy is today that even if RBI cuts the rate by 50 basis point or 75 basis point, the economic activity will pick up immediately or might pick up. Because you have to look at the global appetite for demand, the domestic appetite for demand, domestic appetite for investment, global investment in India. All those things are factors, which the RBI will have to take into account. So, as far as Chief Economic Advisor is concerned, he is right in projecting that the RBI should cut rate by 25 to 75 basis points. But as far as RBI is concerned, it has to take this decision taking into consideration whether it will be inflationary or not to the extent which might ultimately hurt economy.
Mr. Santosh, there is a fact that there is substantive growth in the foreign direct investment in India. And foreign direct investment in India has reached to the level of $43.4 billion in 2016-17, which is highest ever India. So, foreign direct investment, particularly in the services sector, in telecom and banking sector. FDI has mostly come in telecom, banking kind of areas, which includes mostly the services sector, the most robust sector of our economy. And then the FDI mostly came from countries like Singapore, Mauritius and Japan. So, when we are at a historic level of FDI in the country, so that investment appetite of the world is there. This investment is in turn because of the demand expected, which is more than the domestic investment. So what we are lacking in attracting domestic investment in the economy?
Yes, exactly. That is the case, If your Amazon is coming into the country or if your Flipkart is getting one of the biggest FDIs, these are all indications that yes, foreign companies are interested in India, and obviously growth projection, which is around 7%, is one of the big factors. And then whatever steps the government has taken in last 2 years or 3 years or so, and whatever steps are expected in coming years, those are factors, why foreign companies are interested in India and why FDI is at a record level. India is a bright spot. To that extent, it is correct. But yes, you are right that, unless until domestic demand picks up, unless until domestic investment picks up, unless until you have basically capacity utilization in the economy, which again starts picking up, all these things till the time these things are not there. These are challenges before the government, which the government has to tackle in a manner which takes economy to a 7.5 to 8% level. Now, how do you do that?
Interest rate cut?
See, again I told you, interest rate cut at this juncture would completely depend on how RBI looks at your inflation projection. That is one aspect which RBI has to take. That is one area. But the more important areas are reform areas. Already this government has established this fact that this government can take big measures, take GST, take bankruptcy code, etc., etc. So I'll begin from bankruptcy code and I'll begin from NPA resolution. Already this government has indicated and given RBI the powers so that NPAs are tackled. In next 2 years or so, it will be clear, it will be apparent that how far the government has succeeded in tackling NPAs. Another decision, which is an indicative decision, I would say, is Air India privatization. If those kind of big privatization you can do successfully handle in 6 months or time, that will give you a big indication. Third thing which I will say is, if you go for FDI liberalization further, why can't you touch FDI and multi-brand retail today? Government will have to think about. This will show that yes, this government is trying and doing things which others could not. Those are things which will bring in more investment, and this will trigger investment in the domestic sector also. Another 2 or 3 big reforms which the government must always look at is your labor reforms. This government has established that yes, it can clear bills in both the houses. Now, what stops this government from going for more labor reforms, hire and fire norms, etc., which this government is trying to do through states now? The central laws also can be passed. Why can't you revive again that land acquisition bill changes? You must look at that. If this government succeeds in bringing in these kind of changes, going forward, going ahead, then domestic investment will also start picking up. But if you think that domestic investment and appetite will start picking up immediately, this is not going to happen. Current situation suggests and indicates that if these incremental reforms are taken, done, then in next 2 to 3 years, investments will start picking up.
So now from here, there are 2 points. When you talked about liberalization of FDI norms in multi-brand, FDI in multi-brand will provide India impetus in 2 sectors. One, the employment sector, and the second is the agriculture sector. The moment you enter multi-brand, retail FDI, with new capital, new technology will enter. India is suffering from the highest wastage of food grains. the moment it comes, the agriculture will get mechanized in India. So agriculture has a 16% contribution in our GDP. The population dependence is highest, that is approximately more than 50%, which is pegged at 56%. So farm loan waiver, this has become a political fashion in this country. This is not going to help. Everybody knows about it, because this time you waive farm loan, after 3-4 years again the same problem will come up, and again it will be a political decision to give them a waiver kind of. And state after state are putting pressure, and the states have come in competition to each other to woo farmers for their own political end. So FDI in retail, investment in agriculture, because our land holding is very small in India. So small land holding again creates a lot of problem. Small land holding doesn't attract mechanization of agriculture. Then what happens? Our own family consumption, we till the land. So under all these complexity in which the agriculture is suffering, what needs to be pushed further by this government, as Prime Minister has already talked about doubling the farmers' income by 2022, is this realistic? What needs to be done to make it realistic?
Agriculture is a very critical sector. Thanks to 2 good monsoons, consecutive monsoons, at least your food production is at a record level. That is the thing. But yes, agriculture needs special attention. There has been liberalization of FDI norms in food retail. That has already happened, which is a good. But in agriculture, you have to change the basics, the way you are tackling your food production, the way the government buys food, etc., etc. Those reforms, the way government provides subsidies to the farmers. I'll first focus on the way production is done and the way government buys food grains. Now, what in last 30-40 years, whatever the government has done, what it has led to is production of wheat and rice in Gujarat, Haryana, UP, etc., etc. And all that wheat rice production is basically taken by FCI. Now, the requirement is, because the water tables are going down considerably in Haryana and Punjab. Now, the requirement is to shift wheat and rice production from Haryana and Punjab to eastern parts of the country and bring in more and more cash crops in Haryana and Punjab with high technology, with less water consumption. GM crops may be one of the solution, which obviously has got into controversy. So until that controversy goes, it will remain there where it is. So this is one in terms of production and how government procures. Then second part is the way the government provides subsidy to farmers. You give subsidy to farmers in fertilizer, you give subsidy to farmers for electricity, you give subsidy to farmers for seeds, you give subsidy to farmers for all kinds of things in irrigation, etc., etc. Lots and lots of programs and schemes are there. The government will have to identify a scheme where there is a composite subsidy. That farmer, as per whichever is the targeted farmer segment, like the farmers who need subsidy, they must be given a per hectare subsidy. Like you have to give a poor farmer or a farmer subsidy, then you give him 100 rupees. 100 rupees in total. And allow him to spend that 100 money wherever he wants. Like if a farmer wants to spend that money in irrigation, then let that farmer. If a farmer wants to spend that money in fertilizer, let that. So per hectare subsidy is a big thing which has to come. In place of scattered subsidies, you have to bring in composite per hectare cash transfer to the farmers. That is second thing. And then in the marketing part, you have to bring in one market for the farmer throughout the country. And then you'll have to bring in private company in food retailing, basically the way you conserve your food. Unless until you bring in more and more private companies into food conservation and also retailing, the farmers will never get the deal or the profit which the farmer should get.
We need gradual and incremental reforms which will bring a lot of changes. If these changes are being done, that will propel India to achieve a higher growth, and for this government needs to work in the agriculture sector, in the policy framework and in the FDI sector. All these, if done properly, India has a bright future. Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on second volume of Economic Survey for 2016-17. The participants were Santosh Tiwari, Economic Analyst, and Mukesh Ranjan, Journalist. The program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsctalks@gmail.com.